Right, well, let's go back to Westminster, where the sun-bathed David Porter is standing by with this week's selection of MPs. David.
Thank you, Gordon. What is it they say about the sun shines on the righteous? And as I say that, the clouds come out. Let me introduce you to the panel we've got this week to discuss Brexit and various other issues. Jamie Stone for the Liberal Democrats, Paul Sweeney for Labour, David Linden for the SNP, and Ross Thompson for the Conservatives. Ross, I will begin with you today. You won't be surprised when we begin on Brexit and the fact that the European Commission has put down in black and white some of its negotiating lines, and it is basically saying that it wants EU nations to have access to British fishing waters after Brexit.
I'm not surprised that they do, but the golden opportunity of Brexit is that we will take back control of our waters. We will come out of the hated common fisheries policy. We will be able to rejuvenate our coastal communities as we do that. And this is only something that is coming about because of Brexit, which is why today in the Chamber I raised it with the Secretary of State for Mundell that there is, David Mundell, that there is a real danger that with the EU Continuity Bill in Holyrood, as well as the SNP's desire to keep us in the single market and the customs union, that we'd be simply selling Scottish fishermen back out because we'd be handing over all that control that we're gaining back to Brussels.
The phrase they use is existing reciprocal access. Are you worried that the UK fishermen may be, to use a pun, sold down the river as part of a wider EU negotiation?
No, the issue of fishing across the UK is totemic, and this is something where there is a real support across the backbenches as well to ensure that that never happens again. We are here to support our fishermen, particularly in Scotland, where I think it is a very crucial issue, which is why I'm really disappointed at the current position of the Scottish Government to throw them back into the control of Brussels, whereas Brexit is enabling us to take back control of our fishing waters, to set our own policies, and that is something which has been welcomed by the Fishermen's Federation as well as coastal communities right across the country.
David Linden, are you convinced that the UK government will stand firm on this issue and will protect the Scottish fishermen?
Well, I must say I find it a little bit ironic to hear a Conservative saying that they're standing out in protecting fishermen in Scotland. Bear in mind it was the Conservative Party that said that the Scottish fishing industry was expendable, so I think that is a bit rich to listen to that. But we're quite clear throughout this entire process that if something is not currently reserved, it should be devolved, and we will be fighting tooth and nail against the Brexit power grab, and we want to make those decisions about fishing and farming, and those decisions will be taken in Scotland and not by the UK government.
Okay, so if it was devolved, how could, with all due respect, a smaller parliament than the UK Parliament get a better deal than the UK Parliament could get on fishing?
Well, there are many countries at the moment, smaller nations, who have the ability to stand up for their fishermen. I spent some time before I was elected as an MP working in the European Parliament, and we see regularly countries coming, who weren't even in the European Union, coming and having discussions about fishing. The reality is if that comes back to the Scottish Parliament, we can make those decisions, we'll take those interests in the interest of Scottish fishermen, and we will not be happy with the Brexit power grab from the UK government.
Paul, the phrase that has been used already in this discussion is that Scottish fishing is totemic, but in economic terms, is it that important?
We absolutely agree in the Labour Party that fishing is a vital industry for Scotland, and that's it's a critical part of Scottish Labour's industrial strategy to ensure that we have a vital engineering base and supply chain that supports our food and drink industry and the fishing supply chain across Scotland. But it's also clear that the Tories are absolutely throwing that to the wind with their desire for wrestling isolationist control over everything at the expense of actual cooperation and trading links across Europe, which is vital for the Scottish fishing supply chain. Crazy to throw that away with their absurd attitude towards cooperation across Europe through the single market. It's absolutely insane that they're going to do this and pull out of a customs union and refuse any form of customs union with the European Union, our biggest trading area for the fishing supply chain in Scotland. Crazy.
Jamie Stone, you represent the north of Scotland. Are you convinced that the UK government will fight and fight hard enough for Scottish fishermen?
I'm not entirely convinced, but it's my job, representing where I do, to make sure they do fight it, and if not, I'll fight it on their behalf. The point is that I represent communities that were based on fishing, and these communities are in danger of dying if we don't support them. And finally, at the election, this was an issue that was raised with me on the doorsteps. People expressing the fear to me, surely they're not going to sell us down the river for the second time. And if we've got to listen to these communities, because if we don't, it's a really bad message.
Let me move on to another issue today. We have the ruler of Saudi Arabia here today on an official tour. Jamie Stone, do you have any concerns that A, he's coming to Britain, and B, the reception at an official level that he is getting?
Well, let me say, and I don't know what the others will say, but I've had an enormous number of emails over the last, even today, about this issue. Right up in the north of Scotland, people don't like it, and they don't like us being seen to kowtow. Yes, talk to the Saudis, yes, work with them, but don't let's just grovel to them, and I heed those emails.
Paul Sweeney, is it something that is registering with your constituents?
Absolutely. I raised the point in the House today about the massive concern over the situation in Yemen and the blockade of the ports. 22 million people in Yemen in urgent humanitarian need, and the Saudi blockade of those ports is preventing UK aid from reaching people in desperate need of assistance. I've been raising that on behalf of constituents in the House today, and it's critical that we engage with the Saudi Arabians in a constructive way to open up those ports and ensure that we have the vital flow of humanitarian assistance to those people in need.
David Linden, people may not like what the Saudi regime has been doing, particularly in Yemen, but that regime has an awful lot of economic clout, and a lot of people's jobs in the UK depend on contracts that have been signed with Saudi Arabia, military and civilian.
Yeah, I think you've probably hit the nail on the head there, and this is the big issue today. The reason that we're rolling out the red carpet for the Saudis is because we facilitated £4.6 billion worth in arms sales, which is absolutely outrageous. We in the SNP are absolutely clear we want to see a ceasefire in the conflict in Yemen, and the UK cannot advocate that whilst it's facilitating these arms sales to Saudi Arabia. That is simply not on, and we need stronger action from the UK government, and that's what I was pressing the Minister on today in the Chamber.
Ross Thompson, final question to you. How tough or forthright do you want your Prime Minister to be with the Saudi regime?
Well, I think you saw today that Prime Minister will pull no punches. She has been called a bloody difficult woman. It's the first thing that comes up in Google if you search her name. And I know that she will be very robust with our partners in Saudi Arabia. But let's also bear in mind that we do have an important relationship with Saudi Arabia. As even the Shadow Foreign Secretary herself has acknowledged that when it comes to intelligence sharing, we have managed to save hundreds of lives here in the UK because of just that. It's right we highlight issues around about human rights, as we should do with other countries across the world, like Venezuela, Iran. It doesn't matter where they are. We should raise them with those problems, and we should continue to do so.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we will have to leave it there. The clock has beaten us. Thank you very much for your contributions this afternoon. Gordon, back to you in the studio.